All right. For some reason, my mute button is not functioning, so I'll go ahead and ask everybody if you will mute your own video.
We're discovering how all these different CG4 transitions, singers, opens.
Not entirely certain why my button is not working.
From each other. They're not
Bear with me, just one.
that would be like for that one. This one's fine. So let's go ahead and
All right. Well, apologies for the slow start. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. I am Jesse DeMumbry Chapman. I'm the Executive Director and Riverkeeper at Coosa River Basin Initiative, and I will serve as one of our moderators this morning. Today's media briefing is hosted by the Georgia Water Coalition. It's a consortium of over 260 organizations, businesses, faith-based groups, lake improvement associations, you name it, that are all committed to clean water policy in the state of Georgia to ensure that there is enough clean water for all of Georgia's current and future generations. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. I hope that everybody was able to access the report. We're going to go through this slide deck as we move through, but if you want to go ahead and find the full report, it can be found on Georgia Water Coalition's website. That is gawater.org. And right there on the home screen, you'll see a link for the Dirty Dozen report. You can pull those up as you like. I will ask, my controls do seem to be acting a little bit glitchy, so we'll ask that everyone keep themselves on mute. And at the end, once we've gone through the entire report, we will have everybody will have an opportunity to unmute themselves and ask any questions that they may have. We've got a number of the nominators on our call with us today. So we should be able to do a good job of answering specific questions about some of the items listed in this report. And also, you have the ability to enter a question via chat. So if you're in a noisy environment and you want to just drop your question in chat, I will be monitoring that and we'll bring it to everyone's attention. All of that being said, we'll jump right in. We are hosting this briefing today to provide information about the 2020 Dirty Dozen report of the Georgia Water Coalition. This year marks the 10th edition of our Dirty Dozen report, and we like to talk about what the report is, but this year we are notably calling reference to what is not included in the report, and that is the misappropriation of environmental trust funds, which we have been working on for a number of years. And earlier this month, Georgia voters resoundingly approved Amendment 1, which allows these types of fees to be dedicated by statute. And so we will finally stop to the legislative looting of the solid waste and hazardous waste trust funds. That's something that we have been working on tirelessly for a number of years, and are very thrilled to have that be in the update section of this report rather than on the report itself. And it's a good reminder of the purpose of this document for the Georgia Water Coalition. Our sincere hope is that we will chip away at these items, and the work that is done, the press that we receive by highlighting these issues will slowly turn into victories as we get to knock them off of the report. Unfortunately, 7 of our Dirty Dozen are making return appearances in the report, and the remaining 5 are making their Dirty Dozen debuts. To tell you more about them, I'm going to introduce the author of the report, Joe Cook, as well as Executive Director of Georgia River Network, Rena Peck, who are going to serve as our other moderators this morning. And will be leading us through the different nominees. So Joe, I'll give it over to you.
Thanks, Jesse. Let's get dirty. Topping the list of issues making return appearances is pollution of the Altamaha River from the Rainier Advanced Materials Chemical Pulp Mill in Jessup. Georgia's Environmental Protection Division will soon issue a new pollution control permit for the facility. Unfortunately, if EPD's actions in recent years are any indication, it seems unlikely that this new permit will bring the discharge up to industry and clean water standards. But it should be noted that Rainier and its managers in Jessup need not wait for EPD to force them to do the right thing. They can fix their problem now and thus avoid the embarrassment of being included on the Dirty Dozen list next year for a record 9th time. Next up, returning to the Dirty Dozen report, is coal ash at Georgia Power Company's plant Shearer in Monroe County. This year, neighbors of plant Shearer and Juliet discovered pollutants in their well water that are associated with coal ash contaminants. But Georgia Power still intends to leave 15.7 million tons of coal ash on site in an unlined pond, with some of that ash submerged in groundwater. While the Monroe County Commission is set to spend some $16 million on laying pipes to bring county water to Juliet residents and provide relief for their water woes, it appears state environmental regulators will agree to Georgia Power's inadequate coal ash cleanup plans at Plant Shearer. These plans risk polluting residents' well water in perpetuity. The ash should be excavated and removed to proper, safe, lined landfills. Next up, making a return visit to the report, is the Ogeechee River and Milliken's longleaf textile plant in Screven County. In 2011, the facility, then operated by another company, headlined the Dirty Dozen report after it was responsible for one of the largest fish kills in Georgia history. A lawsuit brought by Ogeechee Riverkeeper and a subsequent settlement forced the operators to spend millions upgrading the plant's wastewater treatment system. But problems persist, and the plant's new owners misled EPD about toxic pollutants they discharged to the river. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rena for our next 4 repeat Dirty Dozen offenders. These include a proposed titanium mine near the Okefenokee Swamp, a proposed rocket launching facility near Cumberland Island, the ongoing salvage of the Golden Ray cargo ship in St. Simon Sounds, and a legislative effort that threatens rural communities that just won't seem to go away. Rena, take it away.
Thanks, Jay. I'm Rena Peck. I'm an ecologist and director of Georgia River Network. In addition to being a river watchdog with Georgia Water Coalition friends, you could think of us like a PATH Foundation, but for rivers. And in the Okefenokee, there's 120 miles worth of canoe trails that are under threat. This is the 2nd straight year that the proposed Twin Pines Minerals titanium mine appears in our report. Due to recent federal changes to the Clean Water Act, the only thing that stands between Twin Pines and mining adjacent to the Okefenokee Swamp is Georgia's leaders and a handful of state environmental permits. That's because the federal changes removed from protection 367 acres of once were considered jurisdictional wetlands, a classification that until the change would have required the mining company to secure federal permits and even triggered Endangered Species Act. The federal permitting process could have required the company to complete studies to assure that no harm would come to the Okefenokee. But with federal oversight now bypassed, only state regulators can stop the mine or require the scientific studies that might assure no harm is done. Our next one is the spaceport, or the launch pad to nowhere. Originally proposed in 2014, Spaceport Camden first appeared on the Dirty Dozen report in 2016. Since then, the proposal has only gotten worse, so much so that Camden County residents have started a local referendum effort to stop the county commission's ill-conceived plan. The project has already cost county taxpayers $7.5 million, and they may be on the hook for at least another $10 million just for land acquisition. All this to shoot rockets with a 43% failure rate, arching over Lower Cumberland and Cumberland Islands, raining down debris that can threaten life, property, and the Cumberland Island National Seashore, which we all love and was visited, is visited annually by 60,000 people. It's interesting to note that the Cumberland Island was also under threat for titanium mining by Glidden, but the family stood up to Glidden and didn't let them mine it, or it would be gone like Trail Ridge could be gone. Next slide. In St. Simon Sound, salvage of the long capsized Golden Ray cargo ship is ongoing. It's being conducted by a firm with no experience in managing a salvage operation of this nature. And the salvage method chosen is likely to send hundreds of Hyundais, I don't know how to say it, hundreds of cars, as well as oil remaining on the cargo ship spilling into the Sound. State and federal authorities need to request what's known as a natural resources damage assessment. Such an assessment conducted by NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, would determine what the wreck and the salvage operations impact have been to the Sound and surrounding natural areas, and hold the cargo ship owner, Hyundai, accountable for restoration efforts. Our next slide is our last repeat offender. It's a legislative proposal that just won't seem to go away. And it appears it is all designed to bring industrial scale animal feeding operations and their stench-filled, fly-attracting waste lagoons, think hog farms, to rural Georgia. During the 2020 General Assembly session, a bipartisan coalition of senators backed by rural landowners and farmers fought off a bid to change Georgia's right to farm law. The measure, backed by the Georgia Farm Bureau, would have made it harder for rural homeowners to file nuisance lawsuits against new agricultural operations that move into their communities and stink up the place. Georgia legislators rejected this change, and they should do the same again if this stinky bill comes up again. Now I'll turn it back over to Joe for 3 of our issues making their wonderful debuts on our Georgia Water Coalition Dirty Dozen list. Thanks.
Thanks, Rena. Welcome to the Dirty Dozen list, Columbus. In Columbus, the city's combined stormwater and sanitary sewer lines are sending untreated sewage to the Chattahoochee River during every large rain event. Some of the effluent is released to the river within the city's wildly popular 2.5-mile whitewater run that attracts some 30,000 paddlers each year. In the first 10 months of this year, stormwater has overwhelmed the sewage system and polluted the river at least 36 times. EPD is poised to issue a pollution control permit that will fix this problem, but the city of Columbus has resisted. Only when river users are free from the risk of sewage overflows can Columbus truly call its groundbreaking whitewater course world-class. Next up is in Brantley County, locals are fighting to prevent a landfill from opening in their community. In a county dominated by the Satilla River and wild wetlands, the proposal is, as one local advocate put it, like putting a trash can in the middle of your living room. The landfill is located about 2 miles from the Satilla. Locals fear the operation could pollute well water and the river and could also contribute to flooding elsewhere. The county commission and the local school board, along with more than 9,000 citizens, have opposed the project. But earlier this year, EPD did deem the site suitable for a landfill. Next up, in Statesboro, a $20 million plan to develop properties within the floodplain of Little Lots Creek near the downtown area has many local advocates wondering if there's a better way to revitalize that section of town while restoring the health of the creek rather than further diminishing it. The proposal involves putting some 20 commercial and residential structures along the creek and within the flood zone, and will necessitate the construction of a 25-acre flood control reservoir upstream. The project will ultimately harm water quality and aquatic habitat in Little Lots Creek and further downstream in the Canoochee River. I'm now going to turn it back over to Rena for our final two entries.
Thanks, Jay. On to North Georgia, recent serious failures at landfills in Forsyth and Cherokee counties near the Etowah River have highlighted the risks of dumping too much municipal sewer sludge alongside household garbage. The failures resulted in landfill leachate polluting wetlands, streams, and the Etowah River itself. Now, EPD is taking a look at regulations that will help prevent future problems by requiring landfills to alter their management plans if they accept large quantities of sewer sludge. These regulations should be adopted ASAP, post haste. And finally, there's another problem lurking at Georgia's municipal solid waste landfills: the handling and disposal of landfill leachate. The polluted water that percolates through the landfill trash and is collected below landfills, yummy, is commonly hauled to municipal sewage treatment plants for processing and treatment. Questions about emerging pollutants of concern in the leachate and problems with treating this waste stream effectively have some wondering if landfill leachate should be given more regulatory attention. We think so. So this concludes our stroll through this year's Dirty Dozen. We'll now turn the program back over to Jesse, who'll open it up for questions from y'all. Thanks.
Thank you, Rena. So we have an opportunity here to for anybody to ask questions that you have. If you want, you can unmute yourself, give us your name and your media outlet, and ask a question about one of the entries. We have most of the nominators on the call today. And if you happen to have a question for someone who is not on this call, this slide deck is available at the same URL where the report is posted. And so also included in the report is all of the contact information for all of the nominators on these issues. And I encourage you to follow back up with our local experts on these. But I will go ahead and open it up if anybody wants to ask a question. And again, if you're in an area that's really noisy and you'd rather just drop it in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that.
I have a question, if I can go first. This is Mary Landers at the Savannah Morning News. Well, not at the Savannah Morning News, but you know. So I was just looking at the DNR board yesterday, and I noticed that there is still a Rayonier employee who is on the board. And I was hoping one of you could comment on that, you know, that what looks like a conflict between somebody, that the company that keeps ending up on your Dirty Dozen and the DNR board membership.
This is Fletcher Sams with the Altamaha Riverkeeper. I do believe that is an issue, especially with the change in the state rule right after we got a ruling. I know that representative fairly well. I think that our hope is that continued attention on the Dirty Dozen will lead them to fixing their own problem without regulation. But certainly that that rule change by an employee at the mill that also sits on the DNR board is disturbing.
I'm sorry, can you elaborate on the rule change?
So the rule change essentially means that we can't unnecessarily affect the use of the river. And so you have designated uses, drinking, fishing, and recreation. And so by using it for fishing, essentially that means that like the odor and the color and the stench wouldn't affect the fishing. And so even if it's a turnoff for your recreational paddler or swimmer, we're not unnecessarily affecting the designated use of the river. Therefore, there's no problem with the permit.
Thanks.
And Mary, this is Gordon Rogers, Flint River Keeper. I'll make a further comment on that what we call the Rayonier rule change, which made their life easier, affected the entire state. It was not just for the Altamaha River, but it changed the water quality rules for the entire state of Georgia so that one manufacturing facility could get out from underneath regulatory scrutiny.
Thank you, Gordon.
Hi, this is Joanne Merrigan from WSAV. I guess I had a couple of questions for Mr. Sams. Talk to me a little bit about both of these permits that you're talking about for Milliken and for Rayonier, and what's going on with the EPD in terms of these permits as far as you know? Are they going to be granted easily, or is there going to be any kind of protests this year? It seems like every time they come up, they just get granted no matter what you guys do. So I'm just wondering what your feelings are about these permits.
So I'm going to let Damon go first. He was the Milliken nominator, but I've got a lot to say about that after Damon goes.
Okay. Right.
Joanne, I'm Damon Mullis with the GWC River Keeper. So Milliken is kind of our top priority right now. And we're in the middle of the draft permit, kind of 30-day period, or actually at the end of it. The public meeting is tonight at 7 o'clock, and comments are due by the end of the week. So it's a really good question, and everybody should really kind of find it disturbing at how easily Georgia EPD does renew some of these permits that are problematic, and it really shows a failure in our regulatory apparatus, and really doesn't lead to confidence of the public. So Milliken, since they were issued their current permit in 2014, has had over 24 Clean Water Act violations for all sorts of things: fecal coliform, toxicity, formaldehyde, ammonia. And they continue to violate and operate outside of their permit, regardless of the fines and enforcement actions that EPD has imposed on them. So that tells us right there that whatever EPD is doing isn't working to make them comply. So we have been collecting evidence and working really hard to justify our position, which is they should not reduce or weaken the permit at all. We know the history and how dangerous this facility can be to the river. We mentioned, or Joe mentioned, the 2011 fish kill. But that's just one of many issues that the plant has had. There was a smaller fish kill just a year later after that, and dating back to the 60s when this facility was first permitted. There's been smaller fish kills. Right now, Georgia EPD is proposing to remove peroxide, formaldehyde, and THPC, which is a flame retardant, completely from the permit. They're also proposing to reduce sampling frequency and testing for other things, including toxicity, which is really important because we know they've had violations since 2014. With the history of fish kills, we think they should tighten that. And another kind of disturbing way our regulatory apparatus works is self-reporting. So, you know, it really relies on the facilities to do their own testing, reporting, and submit, you know, the documentation and evidence. And then it seems like a lot of times Georgia EPD just kind of rubber stamps those and doesn't follow up. For instance, this facility had operated for 5 years illegally before the fish kill in 2011, and the regulators, you know, failed to recognize that. And then more recently, we discovered that this facility is discharging significant amounts of PFAS, which is called forever chemicals, and we know they're very dangerous. And we went back and checked per their last permit, if they were discharging these, they were supposed to do a fish tissue study to see what contamination was, how extensive contamination was. They submitted a documentation to EPD in 2014 showing that they were not discharging these chemicals. We now know that they were, and have reviewed this document, and it was completely insufficient to determine whether they were or not. And now we believe they have been discharging these chemicals since 2006. So that's just a failure right there in our regulatory system, and really highlights your question, why does this keep happening? And I guess a lot of it probably goes back to political will and funding, and at the end of the day, it goes back to our legislators and getting them to bolster EPD and their work. But what we do know right now about this facility and the toxic chemicals they're discharging is, one, we know that PFAS chemicals are dangerous to human health. Two, we know the facility is discharging significant amounts. And as of recently, three, we know that they are contaminating fish in the river. What we don't know is how widespread the contamination is. And we also don't know if Milliken is the only source that's responsible. And so we're asking EPD to require the 2014 fish tissue study that should have already been done. And that seems like a very easy ask and not a heavy lift and common sense, but they have completely just, you know, dropped the ball and don't want to address the issue. And to me, that is a red flag and really shows overall that something's broken in our regulatory system. It's something so important and could have such big impacts to human health. The agency, you know, responsible for environmental protection doesn't want to know the answer, doesn't want to collect the data. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just had how long has Milliken had this, did they get a new permit, or did they take over the permit that King America had?
They bought out King America during the settlement process, and I'm not sure about the timing, but they essentially own King America now, regardless. So they own King America, and the permit was issued in 2014. The fish kill was in 2011, and the permit was for 5 years, and it's been administratively extended up until now.
And this public hearing is tonight, is correct?
Yes, the public meeting is tonight on Zoom. You can find more information about that and all this on our website at beachriverkeeper.org.
Okay.
Thank you, Damon. I guess we'll circle back around to you, Fletcher. What is your view on your hopes for the regular permit?
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what Damon said, so I'll keep it short. You know, I think that he's square on the money when we talk about the functions within EPD and you know, their mission set, which is supposed to be environmental protection. But the more experience you get, even outside of these two projects and dealing with EPD, the more that you kind of understand that they have this culture where they kind of use like customer service type of language to deal with these people with permits, where they are more focused on allowing the businesses to operate how the businesses want to operate, and focusing on the businesses as customers versus citizens of the state as their customers that they're supposed to be protecting. Instances that we've seen specifically at Rayonier, part of the reason that they are allowed to continue to pollute the river at the levels that they're polluting the river is because EPD considers the financial standing of the company and whether or not they're able to meet these more stringent guidelines. And so Rayonier took an extraordinary step and actually separated that mill from the larger Rayonier entity, and now it's Rayonier Advanced Materials, so that they did not have the investment to solve some of these pollution issues. On top of that, we've already discussed the Rayonier rule change, and what I'm seeing across there, and especially at Plant Shear, which is our other nomination, is that EPD will bend over backwards to accommodate their customer versus protect the environment and protect everyday Georgia citizens. So unfortunately, we resort to things like the Dirty Dozen and having a lot of media attention, a lot of public perception around these problems in order to push on these companies that pollute this way in that fashion versus the regulatory route that we should be able to take.
Thank you, Fletcher. Rena, I've got a question for you in the chat. This is from Cliff Oxford. And Cliff, if you don't mind dropping your media outlet in the chat so we just have a record of that. But Cliff asks, will the change in administrations possibly reverse changes to the Clean Water Act? And I think he's indicating the changes to the Clean Water Rule that opened up this mining prospect for them. And then a second question, has Twin Pines had a peer review public hearing?
Okay, thanks. I think the first question is from William, and yes, so Biden being elected, when he comes in to power and he knights his director of the Interior, that person, just like Babbitt did, can say, this is not a good idea. Mining next to the Okefenokee Swamp, that's not neighborly. We're not going to do that. There's too much of a risk. And then the whole United States will be looking at Georgia. And I think with the WOTUS rule, we are the poster child for that, the Okefenokee, because of that rule change, like you know, like we said during the Dirty Dozen report. Now there's no federal oversight for the project. So just like Trump went back on the rule that Barack Obama put in, it's very much expected that Biden will do the same. So the pendulum keeps swinging. And just like anyone, any businesswoman or environmentalist guy, we want to know what the rules are and what we can depend on so we can make our plans and be responsible with our natural resources. So this is an opportunity for the state, our Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Division, to come up with our own standards. And these standards, certainly you always have to meet the federal standards. But if your standards as a state go above and beyond that to protect what's important to you, kudos to that. So we'll see what happens. It will happen. It may take a while. For example, Trump was elected a while back and his change in the rule didn't happen until June this summer. Hopefully Biden's crew can be a little quicker on the stick for that. And then go ahead.
Rena, this is Kevin Jesselnick with Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. I'm general counsel with the Riverkeeper. I just wanted to add a little bit more, and then very quickly, we do know that President-elect Biden has a number of environmental policy changes already lined up for when he takes office. The kind of path he takes to do that hinges on Georgia in a major way. Georgia is a poster child for the impact that the Trump administration's clean water rule rollback is having through Twin Pines. But all focus is on Georgia because the Senate races are so critical to how much authority the Biden administration will have to enact changes. If you have a Senate that is sympathetic to Biden or supportive of Biden, they can use the Congressional Review Act to quickly rescind some of the rule changes that the Trump administration has done. If you have a Senate that is Republican controlled, that's much less likely. And any environmental rule changes, policy changes will have to go through the same rulemaking process that the Trump rule changes did. So they will take much longer. So it is up in the air about the process by which the Biden administration will undertake changes to the Clean Water Rule. One option, if the Senate flips, would be to use the Congressional Review Act to do them very quickly. The other option is to go through the typical rulemaking process.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, if I could add to that. Somebody asked, was there a peer review of the mining company's assertions, particularly about water? No, there hasn't been. There was a virtual meeting. They did not even call it a public hearing. It was very much stacked towards the miners. They went on and on for almost the entire time. They entertained a few questions, and that was in no way peer review. There has not been. So what we need right now is for everyone who can to contact the Georgia governor and ask him to not approve the 5 applications for Georgia water and air and mining permits. And in addition, not just the governor. After all, if the governor really listened to what the people said, then the state of Georgia would be much better. We need to also have people contact, if you could, elected officials whom the governor might listen to, captains of industry, people of that sort, and try to convince the state of Georgia to stop this mine. The miners appear to want to go ahead and rush this through before the federal administration change. So it's really up to the state of Georgia right now to stop this mine. So everyone, please help with that. I'm going to put in the chat.
Thank you, John.
Yes.
Thanks. Cliff, I apologize. I think both of those were your questions. So to answer your second one that John started answering, correct. There have been no peer-reviewed studies of their work. The Fish and Wildlife Services comments to the Corps noted Twin Pines' lack of technical competency in performing the needed studies. The needed studies have not been done. So unbiased science is needed. We already have the science out there that shows that this is a big threat. For example, Rasmussen and Kitchen's study in 1995 showed that there is a connection between groundwater and the swamp level, and that already the swamp is being affected by groundwater pumping on the coast. So pumping right on the border will have an effect as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Rena and John. Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, either Kevin or Jason, I've got a question from Tim Chitwood, Columbus Ledger Inquirer. What is the status of the Columbus Waterworks permit since the DNR board rejected their proposal in August, and what happens next?
This is Jason. Do you want to start?
You can go ahead.
This is Kevin Jesselnook again with Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, General Counsel with the organization. Columbus Waterworks has a combined sewer system permit that expired back in 2015. So this permit has been up for renewal reissuance for 5 years now. And that reissuance by EPD has been delayed due to Columbus Waterworks, which is the entity that operates the combined sewer system, kind of refusal to accept some of the proposals from EPD, specifically to have fecal coliform effluent limits on 2 of the discharges from the combined sewer system and additional in-stream monitoring in the river where the whitewater
Right.
course runs and where a number of minor outfalls, as the Columbus Waterworks labels them, discharge sanitary sewer waste during rain events of about 0.6 inches or greater. This permit, draft permit, is drafted by EPD that we actually strongly support at Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. Again, it adds bacteria limits and additional in-stream monitoring. The permit has been sent from EPD to US EPA for review. That's a final step that these permits undertake before they're issued. That was back in January and February of this year. All that remains is for the EPD director to sign and issue the permit to finalize it. So there's really nothing stopping the agency from issuing this permit other than some vehement opposition to the terms of the permit from the permitted entity. So, you know, so far EPD has not indicated they're backing down on the conditions, but they've never taken the final step to actually issue this more protective permit. I just want to say one more point. The Columbus Waterworks has opposed these conditions that have been proposed in this permit, indicating that EPD has been okay with how things have been, you know, up to this point, and these new conditions aren't necessary because EPD has been okay with how the combined sewer system in Columbus is operated up to this point. That's not really true. EPD has proposed these end of pipe limits in 2 other prior permit reissuance periods and just never followed through and took the final step of leaving them in when it finally issued those permits. So this is something that the agency's been trying to do for over a decade now. And they've just had a lot of opposition from Columbus Waterworks, the permitted entity. But they seem to be holding strong, but again, they haven't taken that final step to issue the permit, which we'd really like to see happen before the end of the year.
Thank you for that, Kevin. All right, let's see. I've got from Press Express, Pat Betchick, Senate Bill 384 failed in the last session. Will there be another motion to support Blackwater rivers? Laura Early, we've got you on the call. Have you heard any rumblings of future work on specifically tailored legislation to protect Blackwater rivers?
Sure. So I'm Laura Early, the Satilla Riverkeeper. Senator Ligon, who supported or introduced the Blackwater legislation that Pat was referring to, retired. So there will be a new senator stepping into his seat. Sheila McNeil, she's expressed interest in something like that, but we haven't had any concrete steps towards a new bill, but we're definitely interested in pursuing legislation that could protect Blackwater rivers, again, during this legislative session.
Thank you, Laura. Rena, another question for you from Mary Lander. And John, you may know this as well. What permits does Twin Pines need from the state? And what's the quickest it can get them? Like, what kind of timetable are we looking at?
I'll start just with a list, and others might know timetable better. The main one is the surface mining permit. And within that, EPD has the ability to do more than they usually do in the past. So normally if something passes through the course, section 404 permitting as okay, move forward, then it's a rubber stamp from the state. Here, because there's no federal overview, they've got to dig deeper and do their own due diligence. So there's the surface mining permit, air permit for the processing plant. They'll be building a processing plant by the wood chip mill right there on the railroad tracks, and are even, I believe, going to start doing that before the mining starts, bringing up materials from Florida Trail Ridge, which doesn't really exist much anymore because it's so denuded. We don't want that to happen in Georgia. Surface mining, air permit, industrial wastewater, NIPDs, industrial stormwater NIPDs, and groundwater withdrawal permits are the 5.
I've put a link to where you can find 4 of the 5 actual permit applications so you can see for yourself. Speaking of the Trail Ridge in Florida, the Twin Pines and Camures are still under a Florida consent order for a range of violations for mining activities right across the state line in Florida on Trail Ridge. Should we trust these people with the Okefenokee?
Right, John, thank you. And another piece of it is what's all the public comments that came into the Corps, over 60,000 letters. There is public comment opportunities as well for the state, but they might be quick, they might be fast, and we want to make sure that folks know when they're able to comment and ask for peer-reviewed, independent, non-biased studies, not from mining consultants, but from esteemed, nonpartisan academics, for example.
Thank you, Rena and John. A question, Gordon, you may be able to field this one. I know Woodall is on here as well if he wants to jump in. Amber Spradley from WCTV, can you elaborate more on the farming bill mentioned for rural areas and some of the most notable impacts you've seen from farming?
Gordon Rogers, Flint River Keeper. Thank you for the question, Ms. Spradley. The bill that was attempted in the last 2 legislative sessions would have upended over 30 years of Georgia right to farm law. Under current law, if a person, a family moves in next to an operation that they think is noxious or disturbing in some way, they have no right to bring a nuisance suit. So existing farm operations are protected. At the same time, if you're a rural resident, whether that be simply residential or also a farmer who lives in a rural area, if a noxious activity moves in next to you, you have quite a few years to bring a nuisance suit. That's the current state of the law. What the attempted legislation did was to knock down everybody's rights to 1 year. So if a new nuisance moved in next door, the folks that already lived there only had 12 months to bring a suit. Frequently, those nuisances don't even manifest themselves until 2 and 3 years out. And at the same time, existing farmers' protections were reduced to 1 year, or actually raised to 1 year when they had total protection before. And so it was a really odd situation from our point of view that Farm Bureau and other agribusiness interests were supporting this. And the only thing we could figure out, because of their repeated references to North Carolina, is that they wanted to bring in North Carolina style hog farms. So if that's the motivation, and we watched them quadruple and quintuple down on this bizarre rationale, and they bring it again, then we're going to have to fight it again. We had many dozen farmers join in on our side, including letters to the governor and to key legislative officials. It was a narrow victory, but it was a victory in the legislature, and we're going to have to fight it again if they bring it again. Certainly there are some tweaks to farming law that could be done, but not what they brought forward. With regard to existing problems in Georgia with farms, there are some, but we don't have the massive environmental destruction that states like Kansas, Oklahoma, and North Carolina have. I mean, the Water Coalition and the farming industry and community in Georgia are not enemies. And I'd be happy to talk offline about some of the issues that we're dealing with, but they're very, very isolated and have to do with bad actors. They don't have to do with the regulatory rubric in general, and they don't have to do with massively destructive farming practices statewide. So that's my answer.
This is Mark Woodall, the legislative chair for the Sierra Club. The only thing I'd add is House Bill 545 in Georgia, pushed by the Farm Bureau, is exact copy of what passed in North Carolina to allow Smithfield and their 10 million hogs to run millions of gallons of hog waste into open lagoons. That's the problem.
Thank you, Woodall. I believe that we have time for maybe one to two questions if they're short. If anybody else has anything else. Let's see, I've got Mary Landers. Will the spaceport proposal in Camden face challenges from the Biden administration? I know
might be able to speak briefly to that. Again, this is Laura Early, the Satilla Riverkeeper. We didn't nominate the Spaceport Dirty Dozen entry, but the project would have impacts on the Satilla River estuary. And one of the things that I think has happened recently is that executive orders that have tried to streamline permitting processes have impacted the way the FAA is dealing with this proposed spaceport project. So a short answer to say that I think that there is potential that Biden's administration could reverse some of those executive orders and then allow the FAA to do a more thorough review of the permitting process rather than streamlining and cutting out important pieces of that review.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else on the call with a question before we wrap this up?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Tim Chitwood again. Let me ask one quick question about the Columbus Waterworks. There's a tendency to tangle that discussion and talk about where and how to measure outflows. Is the core issue that raw sewage is still flowing into the river here along the Whitewater course?
So this is Jason, also Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. So Tim, the key or the core issue is that Columbus Waterworks is the only wastewater discharger into the Chattahoochee River that does not have permit limits on the amount of fecal coliform bacteria and other pollutants that it can put into the river. So what this new permit is trying to do is make them measure the amount of bacteria and pollutants that they're putting into the river and control that. Because currently they are the only discharger that does not have any limits on their permits. And we found that unacceptable for many years. And the state has been trying to put these permit limits on the city since 2004, and they've been fighting it the entire way. We feel it's time now to finally get these permit limits in to protect the river and protect recreational safety there in the watercourse.
Thank you, Jason. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning and spending a little bit of your morning with the Georgia Water Coalition. I will again repeat that in both the report and in the slide deck on that website, you can find contact information for all of the nominators on these issues. If you have follow-up questions, these are our on-the-ground experts on all of these Dirty Dozen listees. So please do follow up with them. I will again thank you all for spending your time with us and for the great questions. And I hope you all have a wonderful Tuesday. Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. We can't do it without you.